Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic:
what are the craziest declassified CIA documents? The plan after 9/11 to make figurines that look like Osama bin Laden and give them to kids in South Asia. After it's left in the sun for a certain amount of time, its face would peel off to reveal a demon-like visage with red skin, green eyes, and black markings, basically a demon. The objective was to scare kids and their parents so bin Laden and Al-Qaeda would lose support. Here's a picture of the demonic bin Laden. Looks like a Darth Maul reject. The Pentagon Papers, which were leaked, not outright declassified, and the resultant Church Committee report. These are what made public the CIA's actions in overthrowing governments and instigating, assisting coups all over the world for decades leading up to the 70s. Pretty much every negative stereotype of the CIA we have today was created or informed by the Pentagon Papers and Church Committee report. Operation Northwoods is pretty fucked up. Same with MK Ultra. I'll probably come off as a conspiracy nut, but it's stuff like this that makes me wonder if some of the politically polarizing incidents going on today might be CIA operations. Don't forget Operation Phoenix. Just one example of this clusterfuck. The regular practice of dragging prisoners through streets with a bag over their head, with eye holes cut out, by a rope around their neck, so they could identify enemy hideouts by scratching their head as they walked by. These hideouts would later be stormed and everyone inside would be slaughtered, no questions asked. If you read that and think, hey, that sounds like a good way to get a lot of innocent people killed and not a good way to find enemy hideouts, well. Yeah, edit, as you, the irrelevant, pointed out, I've slightly misremembered the name. It was actually called the Phoenix Program rather than Operation Phoenix. One CIA operative, who drew up a plan to have packets of extra-large condoms, labeled small, dropped on USSR. The idea was to lower their morale. The real LPT is to use the box of extra large and fill it with the proper smaller size. So when the sex partner sees the extra large label on the box, they will think your small penis is really large. Whoops, I accidentally dropped my extra large condom for my Magnum Dom. The acoustic kitty is pretty crazy. Declassified CIA docs linked at bottom of Wikipedia page. They basically put a microphones and radio in a cat and tried to release into the Soviet embassy to wander around eavesdropping since nobody suspects a wandering cat. Technical difficulties, citation needed episode that I learned about it from. Analyzing all that tape would be daunting, though. Over the span of a week, you'd have 6 full days of nothing, where the cat simply slept in the sunbeam, and 8 hours of Russian public servants saying, PSSs PSSS PSSS. Most of the rest would likely be yelling at the cat in Russian for knocking over the vodka glass again. Their mistake was using a cat. Cats don't give a fuck or listen to anyone. Muffled speech, the secret plans are hidden in the Too many Bond movies with the evil villain petting a cat. Psychological warfare in the Philippines in the 1950s comes to mind. The CIA conducted research to figure out which sort of myths and superstitions the Philippine people had. They discovered that they were afraid of vampires. At one point they disrupted a group by snatching a local man, murdering him, and putting teeth marks on his neck. They then hung him upside down for his friends to find, which terrified the village. This was all part of an effort to elect Ramon Magsaysay as president, who basically acted as a puppet for the US. The CIA wrote his speeches and directed his policy. It wasn't just a villager, it was a fighter with a communist insurgent group known as the Hucks. The story comes from a guy named Ed Lansdale who ran the Operation Hisawa squad set up an ambush along the trail used by the Hucks. When a Huck patrol came along the trail, the ambushers silently snatched the last man of the patrol, their move unseen in the dark night. They punctured his neck with 2 holes, vampire fashion, held the body up by the heels, drained it of blood, and put the corpse back on the trail. When the Hucks returned to look for the missing man and found the bloodless comrade, every member of the patrol believed that the Aswang, vampire, had got him and that one of them would be next if they remained on that hill. When daylight came, the whole Huck squadron moved out of the vicinity. Quote, all the failed assassination attempts against Fidel Castro. According to Fabian Escalante, who worked for the Cuban counterintelligence, there were 638 of them. Here are some highlights. In 1960 they tried to poison his cigars. They asked the Chicago mob for help and they said poison pills are the best. The mobsters hired a local assassin, who gave them to an ice cream milkshake parlor employee who was supposed to slip them into Castro's ice cream. When he tried to get the poison pills from the freezer, they were frozen solid on the coils of the freezer. They planned to put explosives under a painted seashell, as Castro loved to go scuba diving and collect seashells. The plan was discarded as impractical. In the same year they contaminated a scuba diving suit for Castro with a fungus that should give Castro a deadly disease. The person tasked with this, American lawyer James Donovan, who was negotiating the release of hostages after the Bay of Pigs invasion, couldn't do it in the end. They trained his lover to poison him, but she got cold feet. They had a James Bond-like idea of poisoning him with a tiny needle attached to a ballpoint pen. The government official who was supposed to stab him with that needle, threw the pen away, as he was too afraid that the needle might accidentally poison him instead. Last but not least they had the idea to assassinate his character by spraying a LSD-like chemical into the broadcasting studio where he held his speeches. The idea was to make him look confused and unfit to rule. The plan was abandoned as the chemical was unreliable. Edit, some corrections to the second and sixth attempt in this list. And Castro wasn't some assassination-dodging genius, he had a double agent in the CIA feeding him information. In some of the cases involving female assassins, he charmed them into abandoning their plans, however. And some of the male assassins found it dishonorable to kill him in cowardly ways given how he would fight on the front line with his men without hiding. There was a respect for him even among his enemies, which made it harder. Like he's kind of a cool motherfucker and everyone likes him, he's not a violent psycho or evil, women loved him, he was just as cool guy and no one wanted to be the snake that poisoned him while he had his back turned. Do we know who it was? I seem to recall there was also an idea to expose him to some sort of chemical that would make his beard fall out, thereby making him less respectable of an authority figure. I guess I don't blame them for throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. But really, Operation Femboy Castro LMFAO. Operation Sea Spray, a 1950 U.S. Navy secret biological warfare experiment in which Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigii bacteria were sprayed over the San Francisco Bay Area in California, in order to determine how vulnerable a city like San Francisco may be to a bioweapon attack. Between 1949 and 1969, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted 239 times. In 80 of those experiments, the Army said it used live bacteria that its researchers at the time thought were harmless. Not so, fun fact. Marcescens is what causes the pinkish grime in showers, bathrooms. I had a family member who had a nasty UTI after catheterization for giving birth, and after a few failed rounds of antibiotics, they finally did a proper culture and antibiotic screen to reveal marcescens and the correct drug to use. Antibiotic resistance is a scary thing, and it's only getting worse. In 80 of those experiments, is about harmless bacteria. What about the 159 times they didn't use harmless bacteria? 80 were experiments with live bacteria, the rest were inert chemicals to simulate dispersal. Serratia marcescens. And it's still a problem in the US water system. It's one of the main culprits for the gross pink, red mold in your shower. It can cause infections in humans and it has slowly become resistant to a lot of antibiotics. Hooray! The pardon of the Japanese who ran Unit 731 in exchange for their findings. They performed countless experiments on live human POWs. Cutting off limbs to test blood loss, injecting them with diseases and seeing how they progressed when left untreated, vivisection of these same individuals, and other really fucking disgusting stuff that I don't have the stomach to type out. You can Google the rest. The US government felt it was more important to have that information in American hands than to let it go to the Russians, or be lost. You'd never be able to conduct those kind of experiments again, and for good reason, so they considered it the lesser of two evils. Except the notes were trash and the experiments were near useless, unlike the Nazi ones. So it was nothing. Let's pour hot chocolate on the brains of the twins and see if they dream about Christmas. Quote. Actually, so were most of the Nazi experiments, in medicine anyway. They did figure out a lot in rocketry. Just about all the horrific Mengele-type shit was incredibly sloppy work without adequate control groups or any kind of real scientific rigor. I work in the biomed industry. Between that and the Tuskegee experiments, those built the ethical codes and laws we have now. They performed countless experiments on live human POWs. A fairly prominent Nazi scientist, can't remember the name, not inclined to look it up right before bed, wrote to his boss, Joseph Mengele, and got him to write to Hitler to tell the Japanese to stop their unethical human experimentation. Joseph fucking Mengele was concerned with Unit 731's ethics. It's that bad. You can download most of Osama bin Laden's hard drive off the CIA's website. It's got a fair few licensed movies, anime, games, that sort of thing. All free for anyone who wants to get it. And his Animal Crossing save file. What I'm hearing is that 9 to 11 was one last job to pay off Tom Nook. Thanks Osama. The Behind the Bastards podcast episode on Bin Laden's hard drive is hysterical if anyone is looking for an entertaining and informative listen lol. WTF, he had downloaded the movie Cars. It was a shared computer, and there were a lot of kids in that house.